When we first started on the air, the staff reporters, staff announcers rather, on the television station did some fragmentary local news, let us say. We had a couple of photographers. They went out and took pictures, and it was a lot of fun, but it was a lot of work, you know. Some of the people on the newspapers, their image of a radio or television reporter was somebody who spent, 15 minutes stealing out of the newspaper and then getting on the air, and then they went home. And they made 5 times as much as the newspaper people. But that was just their image, the image of the radio and TV people. It wasn't quite that way.
This is Fred Hilligus. The world moves fast today, and every day's news is important. You want it clear-cut and when it's news. That's how you get it on your Esso Reporter over WSYR-TV, Monday through Friday at 6:30 p.m.
I was the Esso Reporter, which was a transfer over to television of the Esso Reporter shows they had on radio, the newscasts. And we hired people who were exclusively television reporters, and we'd send them out on assignments. Originally in radio, local news, somebody might write it and a staff announcer would read it. And then at the beginnings of television, a staff announcer would gather the news wherever he could, which included cribbing a little bit from the newspapers, and then he would read it. Then when we began the Esso Reporter, then we hired a couple of news people, and television really took off from there.
My name is Harry Shaw Jr., and when coffee goes up 15 cents a cup, I don't know. All right?
There you have the sort of cross-reaction of 4 of Syracuse's, ladies and gentlemen. There's their reaction on the rising price of coffee. And may we leave you with this one thought. "Nu ska vi ha en porter." Translated from the Swedish means, let's have another cup of coffee.
Of course, the boss man was Curly Vanderbilt Kerr. He was terrific. He'd been the city editor of the old Journal, the Hearst paper here. And he knew news. See, he knew more about news than all the rest of the general managers in town. He understood everything. And someone might call up and say, Hilligus had this story on, and it's only Wednesday, and it isn't supposed to be released until Sunday. Newspapers, and so Curly would say to them, well, was it correct? Well, yeah, it was correct, but they wasn't supposed to use it till Sunday. So Curly'd say, well, I'm sorry, but we're in the business of news, which was good. Of course, on the other hand, I one time read, he showed me a letter for something, and it was from one of the great men of Syracuse, Herbert W. Smith, the head of Smith Corona. And the salutation on the letter from Herbert Smith to Curly Vanderbilt Kerr was, "Dear Dynamo." So that was kind of a disadvantage. I used to tell him that I thought his one regret in life was that there were only 24 hours to a day. So there was that aspect too, but he was a great boss to work for. And then, of course, there were the fellows I worked in with news, all good men. Dick Hoffman, good man. Others, Steve Croft, as we say, he's on another network now on a show that's on the top 10 on CBS's 60 Minutes. And he's one of the 2 new faces, and he's doing a great job. He'll be a millionaire shortly.
I'm Steve Croft. Those stories and Andy Rooney tonight on 60 Minutes.
What about the announcers or what we would call today on-air personalities, people like Ed Murphy, John Gray,
yeah.
Denny Sullivan, Kay Russell?
Yeah, all those other old people, you mean?
I don't think of them that way.
I think of them many times. Deacon Doubleday and Jim DeLine. They're, great guys, all in their own way, all different, but wonderful guys to work with, yeah.
Much of what the news on Channel 3 consisted of back then was Fred Hilligus. Isn't that so?
Well, I was gathering, writing, and reading, and gradually others took over, and then eventually, by the time I left here in 1972, we had a, much like it is today, with reporters who went out and they did a little roundup on whatever their part of the program was, and I would be an anchorman and introduce it. So it changed over the years. Sometimes elderly, obsolescent newsmen like myself, retired, often complain that, well, it isn't like the old days. The old days, we went out and we gathered the news, we wrote the news, we put it on the air. Today, they all have these specialists, and we used to do 3 jobs or 4 jobs. Now they have 3 people doing 2 jobs. They have 4 people doing 1 job and all that. But it's all changed. You know, it's like being a country doctor and you do everything. But today, in medicine, they have specialists, and the medical attention that people get is much better.
But is there anything else that you would like to say to our viewers reflecting on 40 years of broadcasting of Channel 3, of which you had a bigger part, I suspect, than almost anybody, with the possible exception of Mr. V himself?
Well, I really can't say much more than thank them. You know, they were very nice to me. I made a good living, and I appreciate people who thought that I tried to do a good job, and maybe a little bit succeeded.